Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Adam Golov, Marketing Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. We serve a broad client base spanning all industries. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Rob Hanna, President of Precision Content Authoring Solutions. Rob is an expert in structured authoring and content management. He holds a designation from AIM.org as a Certified Enterprise Content Management Specialist and is a named Fellow of the Society for Technical Communication. Rob is a member of the OASIS Data Technical Committee and executive member of the first Canadian chapter of AIM in Toronto. Rob's company employs a team of skilled information architects and technical communicators that help organizations make their information easier to use. Without further ado, welcome Rob.
Thank you, Adam. So, Precision Content Authoring Solutions, a company that founded several years ago, helps organizations make their information easier to use. So our team of expert authors and information architects help with content strategy, publishing solutions, authoring solutions, and content transformation. This is where we really shine. This as a content transformation organization. We come in and we work with writing teams and subject matter experts to help transform their unstructured content to structured content with our Precision Content solution. So one of the problems that we solve is helping organizations understand where the real pain points are. Most often when an organization runs into problems with their content, they'll pick up the phone and call the IT department and say, we need better tools. We need better technology to help us find information, to help us collaborate, to help us publish our content in a way that's more usable, more accessible, more collaborative. But technology isn't the only answer. In fact, understanding that solving content problems starts with a content strategy. So, and it's really important to get this down before you go and start acquiring new technology. So, part of the content strategy consists of three main areas. So, first is utility. Content must be in a form that's useful. So this means that what form is your content, or what format is your content in currently? Are you working with PowerPoint slides, PDFs, and Word documents? Are you working on a wiki? Are you working in XML? And just how useful does your content need to be? Do you have complex requirements for localization, multi-channel publishing, better real-time collaboration, delivery to mobile, working in the cloud? All of these things comprise the usefulness of the formats. The format helps to enable many of these types of functions with your content. And of course, content has to be managed. Putting all of your investment into content transformation and into the technology without managing it, without effectively managing it, means that your content will break down over time. And this is a big technology piece, but it's also a big process piece, focusing around information governance and who exactly owns content within your organization. So maintainability and utility are very much on the IT or technology side of the fence, but they also involve a strong commitment to process improvement and changing the way that your organization works with content. Finally, the last piece of the puzzle is the usability piece. So having this content in a new format, or it's topic-based, it's function-based information, you need to change the way you write that information. So we're not writing documents anymore. We're not looking at a top-down prescriptive architecture. Content's moving more to a bottom-up architecture where we're working with topics and we're performing searches rather than browsing for content to find the information that we need. So this content needs to be written very specifically for this function. And that's where the usability piece and precision content authoring methods come into play. So let's go in and start talking about structured authoring, the reason why we're here. First of all, what kind of problem are we trying to solve anyway? So when we look at this, this is a very, very fascinating presentation available on YouTube. It's called Did You Know Shift Happens? And some very, very fascinating facts about just how much information we are accumulating as a society over the years and what the implications are for our organizations for having all of this glut of information foisted upon us. How do we manage it? How do we author it? How do we trust it? How do we even go about managing it when we are looking at just the incredible rate at which new information is being created and being published and made available to us every single day? This is going to force a real sea change in how we think about information. Well, we have to get control of the what we call the digital landfill of information, all this dark data that lives within our organizations. To make this information work for us, we need to look at changing it, going to structured information where we can work with it easier, and of course our machines, our computers, of course, can work with that structured information easier as well. So looking at a definition, there's a few definitions out on the web on what structured authoring is, but one by Tony Self from his Data Style Guide is probably one of the more concise definitions for structured authoring. So, of course, it's standardized. It's an approach. It's not a technology. It really is the approach to content creation where we are looking at marking up information and separating content from format, which is a big part of making this content truly usable and truly efficient. So we look to the benefits of structured authoring. Of course, we're looking at opportunities for better collaboration, usability, findability, consistency, and of course a much broader palette of publishing capabilities that we get out of having a structured authoring solution. So in essence, structured authoring meets two sets of fundamental needs. First, we have on the human side, well-structured content helps to make the information more findable, understandable, usable, and easier to retain. So having the structures and the patterns of the information really do make for more usable content. But also at the same time, having this structure also benefits technology, helping technology to enable us to integrate information and disparate information and structured data with unstructured data. It helps to facilitate smarter search and better search results. It helps to facilitate process and, of course, reuse of content through through working with structured content. So my early days in structured authoring go back to a few years before DITA came to the fore, working with an engineering firm in Montreal. We were working with a format known as GML, or General Markup Language, a predecessor to SGML and XML. We'd taken on a vast amount of content from the manufacturer, it was Boeing at the time, or McDonnell Douglas, who produced this vast amount of information in this GML. And our engineers were maintaining this information and going through an incredibly lengthy publication process where it would literally take a day and a half to publish your content. The content was hand-coded on a terminal with this GML markup language, and then it went through several processes before it could actually go to print. It actually moved across 2 different operating systems, and there was a big platter that had to get moved from one machine to another machine just to produce print. And of course, this content was printed and put into binders and put on shelves, and we ran into all sorts of problems with it. But it was structured information, so that meant we could do more with that. In fact, all of this content was broken down into small topics that followed the product development lifecycle very, very closely. If it hit a quality gate and the documentation wasn't ready, then the product didn't move past that quality gate. So it was actually quite a beautiful process for a technical writer to see that content had that kind of weight as it moved through the process. So part of my job coming in and looking at that was to come up with a better solution for their content. So again, we didn't have tools back then. So authors, the engineers were authoring this, as I say, in a terminal. There was no enforcement of validation or any sort of rules. They were following a process. They were following rules by hand. And if they made a mistake, they had to wait a day and a half to see that mistake and come back and actually get that correction in. So it was really quite inefficient. So taking that structured content, parsed it into an Access database, integrated it with other Oracle databases that provided all sorts of rich traceability for that information, creating a navigation structure, and then outputting it to HTML, actually to compressed HTML or HTML help, where they could easily search this information and know that the information was always up to date and ready to use. So it was because it was structured that we could, for instance, parse this information, but it was all parsed by hand. Today, tools have become much more rich and much more feature-rich, that they provide instantaneous feedback to the author when they've done something with a structure that's invalid or doesn't meet that particular structure. So structured authoring, since 1997, has become many times much more easy to work with than it was in its early days. So the whys and what fors of structured authoring. So important to understand when we're talking about structured authoring and writing itself is that we have to understand that the way that we've learned to write over the years at school and through university and such has been more of a rhetorical style of writing. So when we write content, we expect it to be read. We expect it to be read cover to cover or start to finish. We build arguments and to reach an ultimate conclusion. So we're really looking at sort of a pyramid of information. We emotionally engage the author and work to build towards an ultimate conclusion. This is language arts for personal response. However, this type of language arts does not suit well for working with technical information or working with structured information for that matter. Here we need to look at a completely different way of authoring, different from language arts for personal response. And we call this language arts for information. And this is an information that's meant to be read, not meant to be read at all. In fact, it's meant to be used. So that means that the information must be consistent, concise, and very graphically or visually oriented so that the user can get in and get out with the information that they need with a minimal amount of engagement. So very, very important to understand these are two different schools of thinking about information and how we write for that information. So when we look at, for instance, instructions from IKEA, we can see this is all very graphical, all very visual and very concise on how to build, for instance, in this case, building a bed. But if we were to try to, say, use the narrative and using really good writing technique and creating some very, very excellent prose to do the same thing, we run into problems when we're trying to do it. So, for instance, if we were to write instructions on how to put together a credenza, even with the most wonderful writing, I look at this and, of course, it's well written. There's not a spelling or grammatical error in this piece of content whatsoever. However, it's not written in such a way that I'm able to use. It was written to be read and to be enjoyed, and that's it. So, talking about structured authoring, we need to look at how we change information. And I mentioned topic-based authoring earlier, and this again is a shift in thinking about how we put information together. So putting together long documents from an outline in Word or FrameMaker or such, they're still it's still a necessary evil to be building books. But having books and deploying books, of course, makes that information harder to find, harder to use, harder to leverage. So we need to look at going towards topic-based authoring and even topic-based delivery of information to make this information truly, truly accessible. So when we're talking about topic-based architecture, we're looking at having standard units of information. A piece of information that answers a single question without having to have context to other topics within the collection. So I should be able to jump into a topic, get the information I need, and jump right out without the necessity of that context. So, of course, opportunities for topic-based authoring are many. Of course, it improves collaboration, which means better time to market, reduced maintenance, better opportunity to balance workload, and much clearer, more concise, minimalist content, or at least opportunities for that. Now, the challenges are also many. Of course, with breaking information that was once a single Word document or a dozen FrameMaker documents now becomes 10, 20, 30, 100 smaller objects, smaller topics that need to be managed, which really necessitates us looking at leveraging more technology to be able to manage all of these various components. But the benefits, more often than not, outweigh the challenges within an organization. But implementing topic-based authoring and planning it out and having the right technology in place is critical to ensuring success. So we look at a topic-based content life cycle as opposed to a book-based life cycle. We start with working with, as I say, discrete pieces of information containing useful and usable information, metadata that identify what its state is, who the owner is, identification information, of course. And then we take this and we put this into a repository, organizing this repository so that this information can be found and updated easily, but then also to produce more traditional information products from. Of course, with topic-based authoring, we look at the benefits of reusability, being able to take topics from one set of information and reuse them in other contexts. Traceability is a really interesting concept, and I spoke about that with my role with the engineering firm, where we had extensive usability between topic-based information, which really helped us to understand linking relationships and meaningful relationships between topics or pieces of information within the corpus of content. So, topic-based authoring, and really what we're getting at here is something that's a bit of a, we don't hear the term single sourcing in technical communication as often as we used to, but I think it really still has a significant meaning in what we're attempting to do in order to make the information easier to use. In essence, reducing information to a single source of truth, or at least moving towards a single source of truth. So single sourcing when we think about it, is really not about content reuse. It's about reusable content. All right, and this has really been a focus, and maybe why the term has fallen out of favor, about the promises of content reuse, because content reuse is hard. It is hard. There's not a lot easy about making content reusable and reusing content effectively. So we need to look at single sourcing as how we write all of our content to be reusable. And of course, single sourcing is not a technology. It's all about the methodology and the processes and the governance around that information to be able to maintain a single source of truth within an organization. So with single sourcing, we're looking at, of course, improving consistency, maintenance, and quality. All the sort of aspects of structured authoring that we're really looking towards. And of course, looking at return on investment, as I said, it's not inexpensive. It is complicated. Working towards maintaining a true single source authoring and publishing environment. So to break this down a little bit, I want to look at what we really need to do with our structured authoring and particularly single sourcing within a topic-based environment. So we need to go about our planning process. And what I'm going to start with is a good example of a structured document within our organization, and that's our curriculum vitae, or our CV, or our resume. And of course, you'll all recognize a resume to be highly structured and very, very similarly structured, one resume to the next, without following a prescriptive recipe or a set of templates. We all know how to create and use resumes. Of course, this is written in what we call language arts for information. Now, of course, what accompanies a resume with any application is also the cover letter. Now, the cover letter is a perfect example of language arts for personal response. So both of these documents contain a lot of the same information, but they are structured differently. So the cover letter, of course, is to elicit a personal response from the hiring manager. It's addressed to a very specific person, and you're asking for a very specific outcome. All right? It is very narrative, building towards a strong conclusion that will hopefully get you in front of that hiring manager for an interview for that job. But let's focus on the resume and what we can do with the resume. All right? So early on, we need to look at how are we going to, what are the objectives for my resume? All right, I want something that's easy to update and tailor. I want to be able to produce different versions of this information, long, short, for different types of roles that I might be searching for. I want to have different formats, text or Word or PDF. Who's going to be looking at this? The HR department, placement agency, hiring manager, or systems that actually go in and scan and parse this information apart. What am I going to use as my definitive source? Do I have a LinkedIn profile, or do I have a profile on a job site where I've really put all my time and effort into maintaining a true history of my work experience and my skills? Let's not copy and paste. Let's see what we can do to establish a source that we can then reuse. And so the first thing we need to do is look at creating a structure for our information. So this is, of course, a very typical structure for our resume. And then from there, go about the process of what technology, what process do I need to have in place that will facilitate this, building and maintaining this structure for multiple audiences. So with this structure and working with this content, we've created blocks of information, and we've attempted to put labels around them and even semantics, in other words, identifying blocks of information for their meaning. And with these blocks, we can more easily then go about creating information products, and of course taking those same blocks and building different information products for different purposes and different audiences. So just, it's not all about XML or all about the tools. I mean, we've looked at, being able to do this sort of thing for years before DITA or the technology really existed to help us do this. So, we've done it with Word, of course. Any sort of technical writers out there, you've probably done it with FrameMaker, working with conditions and conditional publishing to be able to single source our content for multiple audiences. And in both of these cases, they really rely very heavily on the structure of information in order to be successful. So going beyond Word, going beyond FrameMaker, we need to look at moving towards more rigid or enforceable structures to help to ensure consistency and help to make sure that we're able to repeatedly create information products from that single definitive source of truth. So let's just take a look at what we have in terms of working with XML, which is really the format, the technology of the day for working with structured content. So what is it? It is extensible markup language. It's an open standard, and at its core is the fact that this code, this content, can be written by both human and machine. And of course, XML is everywhere. XML is under the hood with Excel, with Word, with FrameMaker, with on your phone, on your television. Everywhere underneath the hood is XML, enabling these tools and technologies to be able to work with and display and interact with intelligent content. So let's take a step back and think about what are markup languages anyway. What are we really talking about when we're talking about XML? So of course, they've been around for a long time. When we were working with publishers and working with typed transcripts, we needed to be able to mark up that content by annotating in the margins what's to be bold and what's to be italicized, etc., to be able to produce our publications for print. Now, since then, since we've gone into the desktop publishing age, we of course do this markup ourselves, and we're looking at categorizing this markup in two very distinct types of markup. That's presentation and semantic markup. So here's a document, a Word document, if you will, that we produce. Now, is this structured? Yes. This is absolutely structured. It's structured visually for the reader to be able to read it and understand it. But what do we have behind that made it easier for the author to work with, or makes technology easier to work with? So we're really relying on the author's skill and maybe the editor's eye to ensure that the structure is followed. But what results is clearly structured for the end user, for the consumer of this information. This is structured. So in order to create structured content, in order to work with this presentation markup, we take the text, of course, and then we put elements or tags around this content to identify what it is, or not what it is, but how it should be presented to the user. So this is very typical of how we mark up information for the web, where we've got italicized content within a paragraph. All right, so this is structured information now. We're looking at an XML document that is written, and it's laid out for presentation more than anything else. So we've got paragraphs, we've got lists, we've got lines, we've got titles, short description. This is really about creating content so that we know how to publish it, how to lay it out. But we're somewhat limited in what we can do with this layout. Of course, we can change colors, we can change fonts, we can change many things about the style, but it doesn't give us the flexibility to do everything that we might want to do with this information for publishing. So that's where semantic markup comes in, where we're not marking up information for how it's to be presented, but instead for what it actually means. So we take this one example here. Now I've got an introductory paragraph with a citation and a block of a phrase of text that I want to have emphasized. Here I'm identifying the information for its meaning. And around these meanings, we can create very precise business rules that says that an introduction must come before the body of a document. We can't take the intro block of information and stick it at the end or in the middle of a document. It has its own place. We've created a structure for this information based on the meaning of that information. So, and then of course we rely on the rendering engine to interpret that meaning and apply markup appropriately. So here we're looking at content. It looks exactly the same as it looked in our previous iterations, but what we can do with it is really quite phenomenal. So we can take, for instance, that citation, which we just had marked up for presentation, and now actually interact with it. So because it's a citation, the rendering engine knows to go and look up that citation text within its database to find a link to that journal in its database that when it's published I can click on it, go straight to a subscription page for that journal or to a library or anywhere where I want to send it, just based on the way that I've marked up that content for meaning. So here we're looking at that same document we looked at before, but this time we've marked it up for meaning rather than just for presentation. So here we've identified this information as a task or procedural information. And here we're identifying specific steps and commands within that information. So we're able to do a lot more, and the machines, the rendering machines, are able to do a lot more with this information than we could just by simply marking it up for presentation purposes. It makes facilitation of reuse. It makes facilitation for other types of processes or content or data integration possible where it wasn't possible before. So with semantic markup, we can more easily disambiguate content, search based on meaning, connect to other related content, and of course making content reuse far easier than we could before with non-semantic markup. So semantic tagging allows us to slice and dice our content across multiple types of perspectives. And that leads to what we're calling, or what's more commonly known as intelligent content, where we're talking about content that is semantically and structurally rich, and what we can actually benefit from working with intelligent content. So intelligent content has been in the purview of technical publications for many years now, but this is really taking on additional meaning in other parts of the businesses as well. So for instance, in the Content Marketing Institute has recently purchased rights to the intelligent content conferences that were once held by Anne Rockley, and she still participates in these, but the Content Marketing Institute wanted to own this and is looking to promote this across its membership as an important part of the solution to creating better, more marketable content. And of course, we're looking at other parts of the business as well, beyond just marketing and technical publications, into HR, into product support, and other parts of the business where there is high-value content being created and used every day by people across the enterprise. So, moving into what is more about semantic content and intelligent content, we start to look at what's currently in this space today. It's certainly one of the most prevalent standards available right now for structured authoring, and it has the highest adoption rate of any XML standard for content right now. And this is DITA, or Darwin Information Typing Architecture. So it's specifically designed for topic-based structured authoring, and it's designed to be scalable and designed to be used in organizations where we can create new semantics or new vocabularies based on what the company or the business is familiar with, to create familiar vocabularies, to enable better structured authoring, better semantics for our content so that we can do more things with that content. So part of the key to working with DITA is with its information types. So what is an information type? An information type is a label on a topic of information that identifies the purpose of that information. So, for instance, we've got conceptual information. We've got task-based information. We have reference type of information. And, of course, we've got also glossary type of information that help to answer many of the questions that we have about technical publication content. So realizing that DITA came from the TechPub world, it has remained in there very much focused on technical publications, but organizations such as Precision Content and others have looked at how we extend this beyond simply technical publications to other parts of the business as well. And of course, DITA is very, very powerful in that regard in terms of being able to move it across the business. So this is what a typical DITA topic looks like in XML. And I won't go belabor this too much, but I want to just sort of point out the major pieces of it. So we start with the root element that identifies what that type of information is. Of course, we have to have a title with every topic. We have a short description that is the lead-in or the first paragraph of any given topic. We have a prologue where we manage and store metadata about that topic. And of course we've got the body, which in itself has its own unique substructures for different types of information that spell out how that content needs to be written. But this, at the highest level, is the DITA topic structure across all the various types of information within DITA. So this is common to any type of DITA topic. Now, to bring DITA topics together, we use something called DITA maps. And so DITA maps are used to assemble topics in a meaningful way. So we start with looking at our task-based information and getting the procedures together and putting them into an order which is going to be most useful to helping the owner or the user of this particular product actually use that information. But then we need to also supplement that information with conceptual and reference material to give the user all of the information that they need in order to enjoy the use of their new alarm clock. So this facilitates a very, very key part of a reusability scenario for working with topic-based information. So being able to take parts of maps or topics and interchange them between different documents is a very, very powerful reuse tool within DITA XML and other similar topic-based types of structured authoring. Of course, the way we write that information and writing topics properly is what facilitates this reuse as much as the technology itself does. We still have other types of reuse, like when I showed the FrameMaker, we still, of course, support conditional reuse or profiling within the DITA standard. And as I showed with the Word example, where we're using fragments or objects, pieces of content from one document to another is a very, very important part of the reuse strategy for working with DITA content. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle is the actual repurposing itself, of being able to produce content that I can publish to any number of different channels. So with DITA, right out of the box. I can produce HTML, RTF, PDF, ebook, EPUB, lots of very, very rich types of publications right from the open source DITA Open Toolkit, which takes our DITA content and actually publishes it to all of these different channels. But of course, we also have the ability to add on new formats and styles quite easily. So we can use this one set of source to produce traditional print or online documents, but also to incorporate it or integrate it into our other information systems for delivery with products or other types of channels that we may not yet anticipate as a delivery channel for our content. Of course, with every coming year, there's new technology, and we need intelligent content so that we can readily map our content to that new technology to deliver it in ways, as I said, that we haven't even yet imagined. So, I spoke earlier about specialization, and its importance is that we can take this concept, task, and reference information and easily create our specialized vocabularies or specialized types of information based on the needs within our organization. So here we're looking, of course, at a specialization for software development, but it could just as easily be specialization within a sales department, or it could be specialization within a pharmaceutical type of environment. It lends itself very, very well to specialization from these base information types into any type of information that we might need to use within our specific industry or within our specific department. So who uses DITA? As I mentioned earlier, DITA is used by a very, very broad set of companies across the globe. It's really not limited to any one sort of industry vertical, and we see it being used in many industry verticals presently. What I think is one of the really interesting facts is that IBM, who originally, of course, created the DITA standard, currently is producing more than 60 million pages of content in 40 different languages using DITA. And this is across product development, product support, but IBM, of course, is moving this DITA solution to other parts of the business as well. So, of course, into marketing, but also into other parts of the business as well. So with that, that is really in essence what we have for structured authoring, giving you an overview of DITA, single sourcing, topic-based authoring, and now I guess we're open for questions if anybody has any questions.
Well, thank you, Rob. A very informative webinar indeed. Just wait for a couple of questions to come in. In the meantime, some house cleaning items. This webinar was recorded and will be available on our website in the archive section located at www.dclab.com. And Rob, the first question that's come in is structured authoring being used in learning and training?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it is definitely being used in learning and training. There's a lot that can be leveraged between technical publication departments and learning departments, of course. A lot of the same types of information, although somewhat maybe written differently or have a different tone or style, still is very good candidates for single source authoring and reuse. And in fact, within DITA itself, there are the standards body, OASIS, has created specific structures for learning and training development within DITA to facilitate the use of instructor guides and student materials and other materials directly from the DITA source content. So learning and training specialization with specific vocabularies for the learning and training environment.
Great, thank you. The next question that's come in is, does using DITA eliminate the need for Word or FrameMaker? Or would one need DITA alongside with any word processing?
FrameMaker does support DITA, and certainly the later versions of FrameMaker support DITA better than the earlier versions do. So certainly there is opportunity for coexistence of FrameMaker within organizations. It just and there's certainly a level of familiarity and comfort with technical writers and FrameMakers. So they can coexist. They don't need to coexist, though.
Great, thank you, Rob. The next question has come in is, do you have any recommendations for books on the subject?
Books on the subject. Yes, so Tony Self's book is quite good. Anne Rockley has written a couple of books. Joanne Hackos and Comtech have a couple of books out there. There's some good reading. I would recommend probably starting, if you're starting from the business aspect, if you're a doc manager or you're trying to sell the solution or describe the solution to a doc manager or to an executive, you want to understand the business value, then you're really looking towards probably Anne Rockley's books to understand the business value of DITA. If you're looking towards how do you write it yourself, then Tony Self's DITA Style Guide is really quite good. If you're looking to understand more of the technical aspects, the processes and mechanics of DITA, then Joanne Hackos's books are a good read for that.
Great, thanks, Rob. The next question is a content management system required for structured authoring?
A content management system is highly recommended for structured authoring, but there are many organizations that start out without a content management system. So it works if you've got a couple of authors can use a file system to create, manage, and publish DITA content, but it should only ever be considered as a sort of a temporary sort of prototype environment where you're working in that environment. When you start to accumulate any significant amount of content, and you of course have more authors working with that content, a CCMS or a component content management system can be of immense benefit.
Excellent, thank you. And that's been all the questions we received today, so I'd like to thank everybody for attending. This will conclude today's webinar. You'll be able to access the recorded version of today's webinar in the archive section of our website located at www.dclab.com. Also, our next webinar is scheduled for tomorrow, Thursday, September 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Data-Driven User Experience, being presented by Dana Williams, a freelance content strategist. Thank you everyone for attending and have a great day.
Thank you.